Welcome to the Journey Home. It's good to have you with us. I'm Jeff Cavins, and I'm actually filling in this evening for Marcus Grodi, who is usually with you. This is the Journey Home with Marcus Grodi. But Marcus isn't with us this evening. His mother had a mild heart attack earlier this week, and he is with his mother. She's doing good, but Marcus felt that it would be good for him to stay with his family, and so I'm simply substituting for him this evening. But what a privilege it is on the Journey Home to substitute. Because I have my own journey back into the Catholic Church, and it's a delight to always listen to stories of people who are coming in to the Catholic Church. And our guests tonight on the Journey Home are exciting. They have a story to tell. They were missionaries in Guatemala. The subject of our show this evening, however, is cultural Catholicism. And so often, and maybe you can identify with this, we grow up in the church all of our lives, but we really never grasp the teachings of the church, or we never learn our faith real well. And as a consequence, we are prey to evangelization. People can come to our door or wherever we work at school, and they can easily persuade us to join some other group because we simply haven't learned our own faith real well. And we're going to talk to our guests this evening about cultural Catholicism in Latin America because they were missionaries in Guatemala. Our guests this evening are Doug and Lani Bogart, and they were missionaries for 6 years, from 1990 to 1996 in Guatemala. And while they were missionaries down in Guatemala, something happened to them, and they made their journey into the Catholic Church. They are currently living in Phoenix, Arizona, and they have 5 beautiful children. I'd like you to welcome to the Journey Home, Doug and Lani Bogart. It's good to have you both here on the show.
Jeff.
Been looking forward to it, talking to you. And I've really enjoyed talking to you earlier before the show. And we're finding that so many people have a story to tell, and you have a story to tell. It's very similar to mine, in fact. And I'd like to just start off by asking you, years ago, how did both of you come into a relationship with Jesus Christ?
Well, I'll start that, Jeff. I was raised in a heathen home, no religious upbringing of any kind. At about 19 years old, I had a radical conversion experience, what in the evangelical world we call being born again or accepting Christ. Mm-hmm. Read some scriptures, a friend shared the word with me. I gave my life to Christ and immediately went through a radical transformation. Quit doing all the things I was doing before that I shouldn't have been doing, and had a hunger for the Word of God, began to read the Word of God voraciously, and began a whole new life, a whole new walk. Shortly after that, a couple of years after that, I met Lani, and we started to walk together, but she can tell.
Now, you were 19 then?
19.
So you were just a young man.
Young man. With no religious background of any sort. I think I'd been in church twice in my life at that point.
Did you have a sense at that time that God was going to call you to proclaim His good news the rest of your life?
After I made that decision, that's all I wanted to do, was proclaim His news. I preached to everybody I could meet till I was blue in the face, and they got very, very tired of it very quickly.
A zealous Christian. Oh, that's great. Yeah. How about you, Lani?
Well, I was raised in a Christian family. My parents were very devout, and they had a really strong prayer life, and we had family times of prayer and lots of singing of hymns and that sort of thing, and we prayed in times of crisis, and I prayed at a young age to receive Jesus into my heart, and I was part of an Assembly of God church, and so I think I was baptized at about 10 or 11 years of age, but I knew that Christ was what made the difference in our family life. And I was always very, I just wanted to live for Jesus with all my heart from the time I was a small child. And so even in my teen years, I never really had any interest in anything except living for Jesus.
That's beautiful. So both of you, really from the time that you were relatively young, you had an experience with Christ, and that was really your whole life.
And as we started our families, we got married, started a family, that family was, our whole relationship was based on Christ. He was our foundation for our marriage, for our relationship together, and it's been good.
Did either of you, in those early years of your relationship with the Lord, was it ever even a blip on the radar screen that someday you were going to become Roman Catholic?
No. Nowhere on any screen whatsoever.
How about you, Lani?
No. Well, I remember having an experience as a child in a Catholic hospital. I had a tonsillectomy, and it was a very traumatic event, and I didn't want anything to do with anything Catholic.
So you might have related your tonsil problem with the Catholicism.
The nuns in the Catholic hospital.
It was the first time I'd ever seen a nun in habit and everything, and from the hospital bed, it wasn't.
It's just a different world for you.
Right.
So as you grew up and you got more serious about the Lord, there came a point where you realized that God was calling you into full-time ministry. Bring us along at that point.
Well, we went through various different capacities in various different non-denominational, mainly charismatic churches over the years. All in Arizona. We served as founding members in a couple of congregations to get them started. It was about 1987, 88, 89 probably, when we first began to feel like we were supposed to do more as far as full-time and with the overseas idea. We ended up in middle of 89, I think it was, making a commitment to go to Guatemala. And
from your local church in Arizona?
From our local church. We were sent out from a relatively small local congregation, non-denominational, again.
And there's a lot of these churches around the country, aren't there? Independent, non-denominational churches. Okay, so they're going to send you out as missionaries.
They sent us out, provided most of our support for our family. We had 4 children at the time. We were not cheap to send out, but they took very good care of us.
Okay. When you went to Guatemala as missionaries, you had your heart made up that you were going to go down and you were going to win people to Jesus Christ. Were you aware that Guatemala was predominantly Catholic?
Aware, yes, but as far as that making a difference, I don't think so. Our main goal was to go not so much to evangelize as to be in the ministry of helps. We went down to work with an orphanage to help train young men and women in manual arts, carpentry and gardening and those kind of things. And so many of our missionary friends went to Guatemala to evangelize Catholics, to save them from the clutches of hell. That was not our focus. We knew there were good, strong Catholic Christians in the world. Hadn't met many, but we knew they were there. And our goal was not to win them from the church so much as to train the ones that were already there.
In Guatemala, Catholicism is so much a part of the culture, I mean just regular culture, that it would be easy to see how people could become cultural Catholics to the outsider. Looking in, they don't have the same experience you do, they're not carrying a Bible around, they're not meeting in prayer meetings and praying fervently, whatever. What was your perception of Catholics once you got to Guatemala as missionaries?
You want to go with that?
Yes, well, I would say I saw them as people carrying around a lot of extra baggage that wasn't necessary. It seemed to me that somehow they had gotten away from the simple truth of the gospel that you just needed to live for and love Jesus with your whole heart and love your neighbor as yourself. And they seemed to have all these other trappings that they were so foreign to me that they made no sense. Things like the processions that they did during Holy Week. I remember going into the hospital there called, it was a hospital named after Hermano Pedro, who is somebody that they want to have beatified there in Guatemala, and they're working in that on that process. And there were all these plaques on the wall that talked about healings that had happened because they prayed to him, and it seemed superstitious to me. It didn't seem like it could possibly be for real. And I just had not had any experience in those areas, and it was kind of scary, actually. I was a little bit frightened by it.
How about you, Doug?
I'd say the same kind of thing. We met a number of Catholics who were, I would say, cultural Catholics, Catholic in name only. Conversations with people who compared the difference between Catholics and what we would call Protestants, but they call evangelicals there, as just being Catholics can drink and dance and evangelicals can't. That was the difference between them. There was no real doctrinal ideas or an understanding of doctrine or of the real differences that do divide us. So in many ways, much of what we saw was cultural. We met some very strong Catholic Christians while we were first starting in Antigua, and they impressed us.
why don't you take us on the journey now? You're in Guatemala. You've been there for what, almost 6 years, 5
about
years?
4.5 years.
4.5 years. You're working in missions, but then things begin to change. Your hearts and your minds begin to turn toward Rome. And tell us how this process began.
Well, it's a convoluted story, like any conversion is. A lot of details go into it, a lot of threads weave together to make it. The Lord was doing a lot of work in our hearts long before we ever thought about Catholicism, raising questions that we would look at each other or whenever they came up for any reason say, well, who knows? We'll find out when we get to heaven the answer to these questions, because nobody seems to have the answer here on earth. Every church taught something different. But a lot of those questions were kind of mulling around. The place of Scripture, the place of authority in the church, is Scripture the only thing we need for our faith, those kind of things. And the Eucharist was a big thing. By that time, we had started a church in Antigua, Guatemala, and we were celebrating what we called communion, Holy Communion, every Sunday, knowing that that was a central part of our faith. And every Sunday, I would get up and say, this is the body of Christ, or this is the blood of Christ, wanting with all my heart to be so, but it never was so, because I didn't have the authority to make it so.
So for you and the people, it was a symbol.
For me, I wanted it to be real.
You wanted it to be real.
And I knew it should be real by the Scripture. But it was really only symbolic, no matter how much I wanted it to be real. And those were frustrations that we had. We were asking a lot of questions, and one main turning point really happened when some friends of ours who had also been missionaries in Guatemala sent us a book called Surprised by Truth. A lot of folks have read it that we've talked to in the meantime. We read that book. We both sat down and read it probably in 24 hours, just devoured it.
Now this is Surprised by Truth. This is the story of, was it 11 converts?
11 Protestant clergy or ministers of some sort who converted to the Catholic faith.
And the reasons why, okay.
And they were asking the same questions we were asking. Many of them were. We looked at each other when we got done with the book and said, we are in trouble.
Can you reiterate for us what some of those questions were again? I think that's important for us to understand. What were the main questions that you were dealing with that caused you to begin to turn this way?
Well, one major question for me was, who has the right to interpret the Scripture? Because our kids were going to a school that was for missionary children, and there were at least 80 different missions represented, and all of them were teaching just a little bit different version of the gospel. And they would argue, in the kids' youth group, they would argue about issues like predestination and eternal security, and depending on what tradition they were raised in, the kids would argue vehemently for different views. And I always liked to back away from that sort of thing, because it seemed that there were no answers. It seemed clear to me that everybody could back up their own view from Scripture. And who was I to try to decide what it was when people much smarter than I had been arguing for hundreds of years over these things? It seemed like
it's a little unsettling.
It didn't make any sense. And I thought, well, is there a way to know what the right interpretation of the Scripture is?
So you have interpretation is one. What would be a couple of the other main?
The Eucharist.
The Eucharist.
And
role of authority.
Okay.
Who is the authority? We were sent from a local congregation, and in our reading of Scripture, the church was to be the authority for the believer's life, but our interpretation of that was just a local congregation.
Okay.
But that did not make a whole lot of sense when we sat back and looked at it, because who then was the authority for the pastor of the local congregation? It just didn't really compute.
Did you have another one, Lani?
well, I remember early on asking, well, how are these people all supposed to grow in the faith if they can't read? Because our understanding of how you grow in the Christian faith was you read your Bible, you pray, and you go to church and fellowship with other Christians.
Right.
But reading your Bible was one of your major means of spiritual growth. And if these people couldn't read, it seemed to me then we were focusing on the wrong thing. It must be that we should teach them all to read so that they could grow in their Christian faith, instead of preaching all these different versions of the gospel. And then how would they ever figure out what the truth was
Sure.
if they couldn't
couldn't
study
read.
or read on their own. It just, though they were questions that didn't have answers.
So once you were faced with these questions that didn't seem to have answers, how did you go about finding the answer, and where did you find the answer?
Well, it was that the answer found us, I think, in a real way. Again, reading the book Surprised by Truth, many of the people in those stories were asking the same kind of questions. And we saw where they got the answers, and that so much of it made sense. They dealt with many of those issues that we were asking questions about in a very sensible, holistic way. I'd have to say that the answers related to one another in such a way where that it all made sense. It wasn't just a proof text here, or a proof text there. It all kind of fit together.
Yes.
That made sense. That kind of said that there's someone who does have the truth. And
It's kind
reliable.
of like before we saw, anyway, in my mind, it's like I saw a puzzle, but there were all these little pieces missing. And when I read Surprised by Truth, and I would read the answers that they came up with, I went, it fits perfectly. It's just like the surprise, it really was a surprise how the pieces just fit perfectly into that blank space that I had had for years in my mind.
Yeah, I like what somebody else said one time. They said, the Catholic Church, it all hangs together.
It does.
It just
It
hangs
does.
together, and
It's cohesive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's amazing how many people have come into the church or have come back to the church as a result of hearing other people's witness or other people's story of how they encountered these problems and the answers that they were looking for and the answers that they received. It's beautiful.
Well, what happened for us was that book opened the door. It opened our eyes to that there may be answers. There probably were answers in the Catholic Church, and we needed to really investigate it and find out if there really were. That began a real process of reading, study, prayer, listening to tapes. We had good friends in the U.S. who supplied us willingly
That's great.
with books and tapes, and just kept feeding us. And it was the first time we had ever read works by Catholic writers, which was, later on looking at it, we thought how haughty it was of us and many other missionaries to go to a Roman Catholic country and not have any understanding of what the Church teaches.
I think that's a good point that you make there, is that you went to Guatemala for the work of the Lord, very sincere, and there's no doubt about that, but you went into a culture that you were not prepared to face. You didn't know anything about Catholicism.
We knew what we thought Catholicism taught. We knew what others had told us Catholicism taught, but had never read for ourselves or studied for ourselves what the Church truly teaches.
Interesting.
A lot of misconceptions.
So then you finally made your decision. Bring us to this point. You made the decision that you looked at each other and said, honey, I think we're going to have to become Catholic. What happened there?
Well, it was kind of a while getting to that decision. We, at the same time, or shortly after we began to investigate, we heard inklings through the grapevine that our home church back in Arizona was having problems. There was going to be a lot of conflict between the pastor and the elders, and it may end up being a church split, which for those who have been in the Catholic Church all their lives, cradle Catholics or whatever, they don't know the trauma that's involved there. We didn't know any missionaries on the field who had not been through that. It's a very, very real thing, very common thing in the Protestant churches. But when the church did split, all of a sudden there was no money to support us. And so providentially, the Lord was saying, you need to come back off the mission field, and while this is happening in your lives, I think I'll show you that you need to make a change in your spirituality as well. When we came back to the U.S., I think we were pretty well convinced by the time we got back to the Texas border that we would have to make a change, that we would have to take responsibility for the things we've been learning.
Now you had 4 or 5 kids at this point.
5 kids.
5 children at this point. What was their perception of mom and dad?
I remember clearly our daughter Kana, who was 17 at the time, saying, "Why do you have to ruin my life?" And we said, "We just have to find out what the truth is here." And
that must have been a struggle for you.
It was because here they were going to a wonderful missionary kids school, which was a strong Christian community where people affirmed all the good values that every family wants for their kids. And they were having strong times of prayer and Bible study, and our children felt like we were taking them from everything they knew and bringing them into a foreign world.
They were gracious, though. They recognized that we really were trying to walk out the direction the Lord was leading us. And they were very, very faithful, very faithful.
I know so often, when we're searching for the truth, it's not exactly just a smooth path. Oftentimes when we're searching for truth, we look clumsy and we trip over things. And people are saying, can't you make up your mind? And they don't understand oftentimes the hunger of the heart. And we look clumsy at times when we're searching for truth. We'll switch. But let me ask you this: do you feel like you're home?
Very much so. Very much so. In fact, we felt like we were home. It was funny. The whole process was leading us back to the U.S. as well. And there was a process of homecoming, coming back to the U.S. But we didn't feel nearly as home coming back to our land of the U.S. As we felt a few months later when we came into the Catholic Church. Then we were finally home.
Great. Let me ask you this: what has becoming a Roman Catholic, what has that meant to you as far as your relationship with the Lord now? Because clearly you had a relationship with the Lord for years, and it was a very serious relationship. There's no doubt about that. What is this, your Catholic faith now meant to you in terms of your relationship?
It has deepened it, tremendously deepened it. One of the analogies I used early on was that I felt like I had been living on a fairly plain, very good, very satisfying and healthy meal of soup before, but now I'm sitting down at a feast with stew, with rich vegetables and meat and all the things in it. My Christian faith, my faith in Christ, my relationship with Christ has deepened and become much more intimate. To receive Him in the Eucharist is the center of life. Prayer life has changed, for the most part, very, very good. There's still
struggles here.
Still struggles at times. My prayer closet was full all of a sudden, where before it was kind of empty, just me and Jesus. Now all these saints and Mary and everybody else in there too. But it's good. It's good.
How about you, Lani?
Well, I think that the biggest change for me is it's kind of like everything has opened up. I had a pretty narrow picture of what it meant to be a Christian and of what it meant to pray even. Prayer was talking to God, and now prayer is so much bigger. Everything is bigger, everything is brighter, everything is fuller in the Catholic faith, because we have so many more teachers and we have so many things to learn from.
I found the same thing in my own journey home, and I've explained it to people this way, that looking from the outside into the Catholic Church can sometimes seem mysterious. You think, what are you doing, and what's that ritual, and why are you walking in that way? Why do you kneel, and why do you bow, and why do you carry it? Why do you wear that around your neck, and why do you have that book, and so forth? But it isn't until you get inside, like a stained glass window. On the outside looking in, it's not nearly as bright and full and beautiful as being inside the church and looking out through the stained glass window, where the light can reveal all the nuances and the beauty and the color.
Yeah, C.S. Lewis used the same kind of analogy with heaven, that it was bigger on the inside than on the outside. And the Catholic Church is that way. It's much, much bigger on the inside than it is on the outside looking in.
Another person was explaining it to me this way, and I thought it was so beautiful, that back when you had that relationship with the Lord as missionaries in Guatemala, it's like you're in one room. It's a nice room. There's a lot of good things to eat. But coming into the church is like going into a banquet hall.
Yeah, a feast.
It's an absolute feast. Let me ask you this, because we're talking about cultural Catholicism. Your view of Catholics in Guatemala changed after you, I'm sure, came into the Catholic Church. How do you perceive Catholics now? And let's address for a moment here this issue of cultural Catholicism, those that are going to church every week but don't necessarily have what we call a vital relationship, a daily relationship with Christ. How do you view that now?
Well, it's certainly not limited to Latin America. As you well know, it's prevalent here in the U.S. as well. I know that I made judgments on some Catholics I met in Guatemala, thinking that they were just cultural Catholics, without ever having a chance to get kind of into their skin and find out that there really was a deep devotion there. But what I saw on the outside looked cultural to me.
Interesting.
Okay, so that's one issue, I think. On the other hand, though, I think there's a tremendous need for good catechism, good catechesis, apologetics, teaching, training in the church in Latin America. People are being sucked away by evangelicals, by Pentecostals, by anybody almost who comes down the pike with an open Bible and a clear description of what faith should be like. And the Catholic Church is losing people by the hundreds, by the thousands.
Sure. Lani? Whoa.
I don't know.
Was your perception changed as far as looking at Catholics now versus before?
Well, yes. I was thinking about the family that we lived with when we were in language school. They were a Catholic family, and it seemed to me that everything they did out of tradition or ritual. And now that I look back at it, I think that as is in most families, some members of the family were devout and others weren't, and so you had the same discrepancy of people who, it could be evangelicals who go to church every Sunday but don't live the faith.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, I think that all denominations are susceptible to this, and that is
We all are.
going through the actions on the outside, but in the inside may be very dry, and it actually may be just something that they're going through every single week, but there isn't any heart behind it. There isn't any passion behind it. And I think that's something that we're all susceptible to. And I think that we can prevent that.
Well, it's too bad that we have, the Catholic Church has allowed the terminology and the speaking of the relationship with Christ and an intimacy and a personal relationship with Christ to be lost from the day-to-day life of the church. I think that's one thing that we really need to focus on.
Recapture is that personal relationship with Christ. That's one of the things that's so beautiful about the Catholic Church is that when you come into the church, as you two have, it isn't just me and Jesus, Jesus and I. It is Jesus inviting you into his family, and when you accept Christ, you come into the body of Christ. You're baptized into one body, which means that there are saints, there's our mother, and we have older brothers and sisters, of course, who have gone before us, and we have priests and bishops. It's a big family. But at the same time, there's a personal relationship with the Lord that we need to cultivate. Have you found the sacraments? Let's talk about those for a moment. What have the sacraments meant to you since coming into the church?
Life. Yes, the Eucharist is the center of life. It's the absolute center of life.
Well, and it's so much more than I ever thought it would be. I'm finding even now, a year and a half later, after coming into the church, that I'm seeing so much more. I used to think that Catholics believed that Jesus' body and blood, Jesus was there present, his body and blood. But now I see that no, it's not just his body and blood, it's also his soul and divinity. And so many thoughts have changed because I thought, I saw it through different lenses. It's as if I had dark glasses on, and then suddenly the lights turned on.
That's beautiful. I can tell just by looking at you that you have the joy of the Lord all over your face, and I know what you're talking about, and I know what it means to be home, and the great joy of being part of the Roman Catholic Church. Well, I want to encourage you to stay with us because we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to take some of your calls, and I know that many of you have questions that you would like to ask Doug and Lani about their journey back into the Catholic Church, and so we'll take a break, and we'll be back right after this. Welcome back to The Journey Home. I'm Jeff Cavins, and I'm filling in for Marcus Grodi on this edition of The Journey Home. And our guests today are Doug and Lani Bogart, and they are former missionaries from Guatemala, had a relationship with the Lord at a very young age. And then when they were missionaries, and I think about their fourth year, they began to turn their attention towards Rome and came into the Catholic Church. And we've been talking about how that process took place and how their life has changed. And we do have a call. We have our first call this evening. What's your name and where are you calling from?
Hi, Jeff. My name is Monica, and I'm calling from Pennsylvania.
Hi, Monica.
Hi. I have a question for you, Doug and Lani. What can Catholics in this country do about the situation of missionaries going all over Central and South America in such great numbers to take Catholics out of the true church? It seems like every evangelical I know has a brother, a cousin, a friend who is a missionary, and they're doing a lot of success. And even when you walk in an evangelical church, you see dozens of missionaries from that individual church that are in all these different countries. What could we do, besides pray, to get the church to back more missionaries to re-evangelize the cultural Catholics in these countries?
Good question, Monica.
Good question. I think the primary thing is to pray. I really do believe that prayer will be the primary weapon. Rosaries, intercession to our Mother, lots and lots of prayer needs to go up. There are a few lay movements of missionaries going around the world. We even have notes of folks who are Catholic lay missionaries with evangelical organizations.
Really?
And they're making a way for them to go and preach the gospel as Catholics, which is very wonderful. Unfortunately, there's not a whole lot in place for particularly lay missions in Latin America or any part of the world, really.
You mentioned something to me during the break, and that was that some of the teaching that you received as a missionary going to Guatemala was simply wrong about the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
And I would like you to explain that, but perhaps part of the answer to Monica's question is that we can do a better job of explaining what we believe as Catholics.
Well, I believe that's true because I know when we went to Guatemala, we had read a book about, it was called Crisis in Latin America, and one of the points the author made, and we believed it, was that in Latin America, the Catholic Church presents Jesus as either a helpless babe or a crucified Christ who is powerless, and that the people need to see the power and the living power, the resurrection power of Jesus. And if you believe that to be true, you really do have a mission in your heart when you go to those countries, because you think that these people have a wrong view of Jesus. But the main reason why Protestants believe that that's true is because they don't have any understanding of the Catholic view of Jesus being fully present, body, blood, soul, and divinity in the Eucharist.
Alive and well.
Right, and that he's there to change your life at every Mass.
Right.
And unfortunately, many of the Catholics don't have that perception either, that he is truly alive and present in the Eucharist.
So maybe that's something we can do a better job of, is teaching and certainly catechizing. We can do a better job. And when it comes to missionaries coming into these Latin American countries, they come in primarily with one weapon, and that is the Bible. And oftentimes they know 20, 30 verses very, very well. And learning Scripture is something that we do need to do a better job
Definitely.
Well, let's take our first email tonight to both of you. What about Mary? Anna writes. She says, what about Mary? It seems Protestants really don't understand her role. Did you have to inform yourself more in order to appreciate her life?
Yes, Mary was a real stumbling block.
Okay.
In fact, she was, in a real way, one of the last issues we tackled. Actually, Lani had an experience with Mary early on that really helped her come into a more quick acceptance of her role. I struggled.
You struggled.
I struggled with Mary a lot. She seemed, in my view, to usurp Christ's place in too often. I really accepted her role out of obedience, by faith. The Church is true. The Church's teaching is true. So therefore, the Church's teaching about Mary must be true. Agree with it, understand it, emotionally accept it or not. It's got to be true. So I'll take it at that value. And it took research. It took beginning to pray the Rosary. It took beginning to really think through her role through Scripture to be able to appreciate her role.
I like what you said, that those two things, that research, you had to study. You had to look at what the Church taught, but then you also entered in experiential.
Both hand in hand.
And when you meet someone that has an impact on your life, you can't deny.
That's right.
That's right.
True.
How did you, Lani, deal with the issue of Mary?
Well, I had an experience right after reading Surprised by Truth, a Catholic neighbor who was Guatemalan came and brought me about 2 or 3 dozen beautiful red roses, and they were the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen in my life. And she brought them to me because I was sick, and just came in right into my bedroom, dropped them off, and said, "I hope you feel better," and left. And I was just overcome with the beauty of these roses. And so I thought, I need to offer some sort of prayer of thanksgiving for these. And so the idea of looking up the Magnificat and reading that out loud as a way of saying thank you to God came into my mind. And it was an unusual idea. I don't know how to say where it came from.
Had no inkling that roses were her flower
I didn't
either.
know anything about that. I didn't know roses were connected with Mary at all. And so I read the Magnificat out of my NIV Bible, and then at the very end of that I said, "And thank you, Mary, for giving us that beautiful prayer." And I know that something happened at that instant. I experienced something that I can't put into words.
That's beautiful. It's amazing how the Lord takes us down, on this journey, different roads, and He pops up at certain points and surprises us, with His grace. Well, let's take another call this evening. Welcome to the Journey Home. What is your name and where are you calling from?
Hello?
Hi, what's your name and where are you calling from?
Ryan Starks. Calling from Chicago.
What's your question?
It's that most people come to the church from someone else saying something to them, but I just came in because I always liked the church. Now I'm falling in love with the church. And over April, I was baptized.
Fantastic.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
And I'm still learning, and I still have a lot to learn. So I'm doing better.
That's good. Well, I want to thank you for calling and welcome into the church. And she brings up a point. So many of us do come into the church as a result of somebody talking to us. And have you had an opportunity to talk to any of your old friends in Guatemala?
In Guatemala, no. Some of them have come up here. We've had a chance.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, it's been good. But really, most of the people who were a part of our life in our former church have really not much to do with us anymore. We have not made much contact there. We've had a few people ask us, tell us the story. What's going on here? What's happened to you?
Right.
And we treasure that because they actually care enough to really want to know the story.
Yeah.
Many, many more have just said, well, off the deep end.
Yeah. Let's go to another phone call. And what is your name and where are you calling from this evening?
Hello?
Hi, what's your name? You with us?
Yes. Are you talking to me?
Yes, what's your name?
Okay, my first name is Miriam.
Okay.
And I'm from Guatemala, from Antigua.
You are?
From where the people were.
And
I would like to ask them, have they gone back and tried to bring back the people they took out of the Catholic Church?
Well, that's that's what we just had on our minds. That's Miriam from Guatemala, from actually your city.
Yeah, from Antigua.
That you were at, and she wants to know have you gone back there and have you spoken to those people that you took out of the Catholic Church?
Unfortunately, no.
Okay.
I would love to go back to Guatemala as a Catholic, not only to speak with people and be able to share with them our faith and the truth, but also just to experience Guatemala as a Catholic. It is especially Antigua, it is such a Catholic city.
Yeah.
Just Catholicism oozes out of the buildings. It's wonderful. But I didn't experience it as a Catholic. I would love to go back for that.
I had the same experience. I went to Costa Rica and down in Central America, and I have to tell you, it was absolutely beautiful to see how Catholicism, you could feel it in every pore and fiber in society. And I think that's what this is all about, is where the message of Jesus Christ touches everything, politics, sports, in every area, it's there.
That's right.
Antigua, Guatemala has the largest Holy Week celebrations in all the Western Hemisphere. All of Holy Week, processions down the streets with incense and huge floats with men carrying these floats. Just people come from all over the world to be a part of this, to watch it. And our first few years there, we saw it as just a cultural thing, a hangover from old days, and maybe it's a tourist attraction. Our last year there, we'd been studying Catholicism for about a year by the time Easter rolled around. And I couldn't wait to get out there and be a part of the processions. I even got to carry the ark on one of the processions. It was a wonderful, wonderful treat to be able to enter into the Catholicism of Antigua that one time.
But I know I would also love to go back to Guatemala, and our children already have plans to go back and tell the kids, the youth there, what the church really teaches, and they all want to go back.
That's
so
beautiful.
there is hope.
Let's go to another email. I think this is Rick, and he says, I am Catholic, but within the past year, I have explored other churches, mostly Pentecostal and non-denominational. The major reason for this was because I enjoy so much the praise and the worship services, and that the people are so happy to get to know you and pray for you. These are areas in which I feel the Catholic Church lacks. I would be very interested to know what you feel about these areas.
I understand the feeling. The leaving behind of the exuberant praise, the rich sense of sung worship, it was tough in some ways. But the Lord prepared our heart to make the liturgy take that place and more. The liturgy has become so rich. We are fortunate. In our parish, we have beautiful liturgy. A lot of music, well sung, well performed, the whole assembly joins in, and it is rich. It's beautiful. We're fortunate that way. I know it's not the case for most. Hard to tell, Rick, what to do.
Well, you know, sometimes, and I'd say, I believe it's Rick, that so often we equate praise or volume or music with anointing or authenticity, and certainly there's a time where we are exuberant and we praise the Lord, and in Guatemala, it sounds like in your processions you certainly did this. And there was
definitely,
tremendous emotion, tremendous singing and excitement involved there. But in the liturgy, we enter into such a deep, deep mystery, and I can just comment on this myself and say that as Doug was saying, you enter into such a richness that surpasses anything that I have experienced before, and that's such a deep, deep inner joy. But one of the things we have to be careful of is equating authenticity with volume or authenticity with exuberance. There may be authenticity there, but authenticity, truth, is not determined by volume, or it is not determined by how excited you may feel about singing a song, because you can certainly sing inspiring songs, but there may be something actually wrong with that, with that song. And but I think that what Rick is saying, there's a point there that I know both of you would say, yes, we do need to embrace our faith with not only our heads, but with our hearts and
our voices.
Yes, and with our voices, and we do need to rejoice with all of our hearts.
One thing that helped me a lot, even before we became Catholic, when we were beginning to research and we were starting the church in Antigua, I started having more of a desire for liturgy, more of a formal liturgy, based primarily on reading of the first few chapters of the book of Revelation, and seeing the heavenly liturgy, and knowing that that's what we were here for, to be prepared to be a part of that liturgy. And it does have the same qualities as the Mass, with the responses and the back and forth and the prayers, and the Mass really is a picture of that.
Yeah.
And so
I love to praise the Lord just like you and everybody else, but I feel like I just have to reiterate once again that volume or exuberance isn't necessarily truth. I remember one time years ago we were playing some music and we played at a certain level, and people said, well, turn it up, and everybody turned the levels up, and people left there saying it was so anointed. I think what they meant to say is it was so loud that it made me feel good. You know?
You could feel the music in your bones.
Yeah, you could feel the music in your bones, and it's nice to do that now and then, but that isn't necessarily truth.
Oh, yeah.
Well, let's go to another phone call. I think we have another phone call tonight. What is your name and where are you calling from?
Hi, Jeff. My name's Terry. I'm from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Hi, Terry.
And I've been trying to call. I'm so glad I'm getting to talk to you. I tried to call you on the Life on a Rock, but I never got through. But anyway, I'm calling about my son. He's he's a good kid and everything, but he doesn't believe in God. Rather, he believes in God, but he doesn't believe in a pope, and he doesn't. How do I get him to come back to the journey home? I said, I watch his program, and I wish I could get him to come back home.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that you represent probably an awful lot of callers around the world who have family members that have left the church, and your heart cries out for them to come back because you realize the richness of the faith. And they left, frankly, because they didn't understand the richness of the faith. Mm-hmm. And as Guatemalan missionaries, what would you say to her as far as bringing her son back? He's left. He doesn't believe necessarily in all these things. Do you have any advice?
The same advice as for one of the previous callers, prayer. I'm sure she is praying and praying and praying for her son, and that is the key, because it is only the Holy Spirit who can draw us back. Prayer, and to live a life of an informed, knowledgeable, reverent, devout life ourselves.
And when you're presenting the gospel and you're talking about the church, it's important to remember that we're talking about a family here. And you're talking about our Lord, you're talking about Our Lady, the saints, you're talking about the meal, you're talking about the sacraments, and it's a very complete picture, but make sure that you present it as the family of God and God's salvation history. It's His plan for mankind and how the Catholic Church fits into His history. And that's really, really important, that this didn't just show up on our desks the other day, and the Bible didn't fall down the other day for us to open it up and try to interpret it, but we have been born again into a family with a rich tradition, and we need to know that tradition. Let's take one more quick email. We have a few more minutes left in the show. This writer says from Alberta, your conversion story is very inspiring. Thank you. My question is about evangelizing Christian friends. What books or information would you suggest that we share on our Catholic faith that could draw them into the church? We aren't sure what approach would be gentle and loving without being pushy.
I think the first thing is to make sure they want to read it. Make sure they want the information first. Our friends who sent us Surprised by Truth first asked, this is our story, we have converted, would you like to know more about it? And when we responded yes, they were more than willing to share with us, rather than pushing stuff on us. It was good and gentle that way. Everybody's different, but I know that for us, conversion stories were very good. Surprised by Truth, Marcus's
now you mentioned Surprised by Truth, and I just want to clarify, because we're going to get all kinds of calls saying, what is this Surprised by Truth? Surprised by Truth is a book written, edited by Patrick Madrid.
Right.
And has 11 convert story. You can get it at almost any Catholic bookstore.
Yeah, in fact, I think Marcus's story is in there. I think it's one of the stories in that book.
Yes, it is.
Yeah,
it is.
The Coming Home Network also has a book out of conversion stories that is very good.
That's right.
Born Fundamentalist, Born Again Catholic by David Curry, a wonderful book we read when we got back to the U.S., and it was because of our fundamentalist sort of roots, it spoke very much to where we were coming from.
And I think there's tremendous books. Ignatius Press has so many fine books. St. Joseph Communications has
Catholic
wonderful
Answers.
tapes, Catholic Answers,
Sure.
Envoy Magazine. I mean, there's all kinds. You can get on the web and you can search
Great
for Catholic.
websites.
And a lot of great websites, lots of information out there, apologetics. I mean, there's no lack of information if when you want to look for it. We've got so much. Hey, this has been so good to hear your journey, and your journey, I'm sure, has rung in the hearts of many of our viewers true. And they're saying, that's me. At one stage of that journey, whether it's the beginning, the middle, or the end, they're saying, that's me. And I want to thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thank you
and
for
welcome home. You know what? We're going to be back in just a moment. And when we come back, we'll have just a few closing comments. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Journey Home. In the last few minutes that we have together on this edition of the Journey Home, I just want to ask our guests, Doug and Lani Bogart, one last question, and that is, what has this coming into the Catholic Church meant in terms of your marriage?
It's richened it. It's deepened it. We've had a great marriage, 22 years now, that has been wonderful, built on the grace of God. He's been so faithful to us, in spite of all of our unfailing our failings, our unfaithfulness. But the sacrament, to know that our marriage is a holy sacrament before God, has just deepened our relationship, our love for one another, even our relationship with our children. They have become so much more gifts of the Lord to us.
Beautiful.
Well, and I think the whole state of marriage has been elevated so much higher than I ever imagined. When I started reading about the sacrament of marriage as written about by Catholic writers, it was as if it came from an earthly plane somewhere up into the heavenlies. And I remember early on commenting to Doug, "Don't you see, our kids are our holy charges, and you're the king of our house, and I'm the queen," and and it was like a fairy tale in some ways.
Oh, that's beautiful.
We have such a wonderful example in the Holy Family too, that we really,
Joseph,
we knew it was there
Mary,
before,
Jesus.
but it was never emphasized before, never really shown as an example that we could emulate and emulate well.
And to think that it's a vocation, it's our calling, it's something so much more holy than we ever imagined before. It brings it out of the earthly realm into the heavenly.
Right. I know that some people are curious. What are you doing today now? You're not missionaries in Guatemala. What are you doing today?
In a way, we're missionaries in the U.S., I think, in a real way. I'm teaching in a public vocational high school. My students are all dropouts, many of them or recently ex-gang members, some with prison records and have served time. I'm teaching them construction, how to build homes, how to remodel homes, and to learn a trade, basically.
Okay. And?
Well, I work during the school year as a teacher's aide in a kindergarten classroom in the parochial school at our parish.
Good. Well, it's been so good to talk to you, and I've really, really enjoyed talking to you. Well, friends, we've been talking with Doug and Lani Bogart about cultural Catholicism, their perceptions of Catholicism in Guatemala when they were missionaries, and how those perceptions changed once they came into the Catholic Church. And when we talk about cultural Catholicism, oftentimes that word has a negative connotation, but it doesn't necessarily have to have a negative connotation, because really our faith is meant to be a part of every fiber of society. That when people look into politics, or they look into sports, or any type of element of society, they should see elements of our faith. They should see traces of Jesus Christ and the love of Jesus Christ. And so our goal really is to become cultural Catholics, in that our faith would be seen out there in the public. But the danger is when we don't embrace our faith personally and get to know our faith and enter into a dynamic relationship with Jesus, and we just go through the actions. A couple of dangers. One, we don't provide a light to the world. We're not saying anything. We're not telling the truth. And second of all, we're vulnerable. We're vulnerable to missionaries who are coming in. We're vulnerable to any message. And if we don't stand up for this, we may fall for anything. So I would encourage you to embrace your faith, live your faith out in the streets. Shout it from the rooftops. Pray for Marcus and his family. Everything is going well. He'll be back with you next week. God bless you, and thanks for tuning into the Journey Home.